If I were to show you a comparison between older Tristam and newer Tristam, you would not believe they were the same person. Kicking off his Keeping It Surreal EP, there are so many jokes to be made with this being a drum step song, even though they gave it the drum and bass color. But like I said in 2011, you'd be missing out if you didn't listen to some older Feej. A song about me as a kid. Feej just knows me so well. Because he wasn't satisfied doing it the first time, I guess? My favorite thing about this remix is just telling people that F777 technically released on Monstercat. Is it a bad thing that I haven't seen anything from this person outside of this remix? Okay, so maybe the remixes this year weren't exactly the best thing ever. Two things here. One, for those of you that don't know, this is a remix of Going Quantum's Hello. And if you're wondering why they titled it like this, your guess is as good as mine. Second, what the fuck is this visualizer doing? Tristam's Smashing Noobs EP, yes, that was the name of the actual EP, was released with our introduction to Rogue, who's another artist that goes on to be a pretty significant household name within the Monstercat family. I should also mention that not only was this EP our first exposure to Tristam's iconic vocal ability, but it also technically isn't a Monstercat release anymore, as most of his older work is now considered self-released. But despite all that, I'm still gonna share him here because A, it's a pretty significant part of Monstercat's history, and B, it's fucking Tristam. As much as I love Tristam's stuff, I never said he was perfect. Their kill must have been so clean I can barely hear him on the song. Like, at all. I swear half the lyrics in the song are creep and crawl. This title would make sense if it was about how old this EP is. Okay, can we just take a minute here and ask, what the fuck was the beginning of this year? A bunch of Fiji Ouija, a bunch of Tristam, a bunch of random remixes, what the hell? Even for 2012, Noisestorm proves that he can be a pretty quality producer. Ironically enough, this is the only one of their collabs I always felt lacked substance. Cruella's Monstercat debut, and I always feel bad for forgetting it exists, especially since it's quite the banger. Considering this is the last time we'd ever see Arian on the label, this was one hell of a way to go out. One of the cooler songs from Obsidia's time on Monstercat. Weirdly enough, probably the goofiest song he's ever made. See, my problem with this is that you can't really change the game on day one, you kinda have to let the game play out. Yeah, I'll just shut up. This was the release of Noisestorm's Renegade EP, which featured this song as well as the previous two singles Backlash and Let It Roar. If you're looking for some solid classic Monstercat, this EP should definitely be on your list. Okay, I'll admit, the switch up from drumstep to Moombahton is pretty cool. It was pretty common throughout this period that whenever someone would release an electro song on Monstercat for the very first time, it would almost always be a fucking banger. And thankfully this is no exception to that. Every time I hear that piano, it just gets stuck in my head for a solid day or two. At this point, I'm starting to wonder if Project 46 is just allergic to any other color than fucking orange. You can almost hear the building blocks of what would later become Muzzy's core sound. Right from this song here. One word. Saxophone. I still don't understand this title nearly 12 years later. Droptek's Monstercat debut, despite not being the flashiest artist out there, he would go on to drop some pretty quality stuff, especially once we get into the 2014-2015 era. This is a great song to send someone to remind them your birthday's coming up. The very first release of two of arguably the most iconic producers in Monstercat's history was a VIP of a song that wasn't even on the label. You really can't make this shit up. Man, I really like Day 1 by For the Stars. I love that this ended up being the first time we ever had a song labeled Glitch Hop / 110 BPM, which people would just recognize as Glitch Hop. And also the first time they used the color of gray. But the one thing everyone remembers from this song was, every time I touch Mac. If you ever wanted a Dark Souls boss fight layered under 2012 dubstep, then look no further. Yep, we have Throttle making his debut here, and if you didn't know about Throttle's releases before he came back to the label in 2019, well, you're in for quite a ride. One of the many D&B songs during this era that I really wanted to like, but the invisible powers that be wouldn't let me. Okay, to be fair though, at the time, he was a mysterious stranger. The debut of Televisor, the debut of the new disco subgenre on Monstercat, the funkiest Monstercat song to exist at the time, and to top it all off, it's just so goddamn fun. Redundant? Much redundant? Rogue's first Monstercat release by himself, and judging how often he released with Monstercat from this point forward, I'd say it worked out. Okay, I know you're not the real one-up mushroom. How'd you get past Nintendo TSA? You ever wonder what Apache sounded like before he became the electronic-infused orchestral producer that he is now? Well, here's a good place to start. Someone really took that one Aryan song and said, you know what, that would be a sick name for an alias. God damn that voice. Tell you what, the first person who can tell me how to pronounce that name correctly gets their comment pinned. Oh boy. Granted, it's pretty dated by today's standards, but it's not hard to tell why it became a big hit for them. Why is this song so weirdly badass? For all the younger viewers out there, listen to this one with headphones on, preferably without your parents around. Just trust me on this one. If anyone was gonna challenge Daft Punk in who could make the best disco music in the early 2010s, it would have been these guys. I always thought this was an underappreciated one, mainly because it's much calmer than damn near anything else he made. Pretty big at the time, but never really stuck with me, unfortunately. Going Quantum's Hello EP may have only been the original plus a few remixes, but I always had a soft spot for this one. It's hard for me to describe this song other than the original if Stephen Hawking made it instead. As the first track from Tristam and Rogue's Catalyst EP, this one was, well, it was. It's songs like these that make me wish they would have worked together more often. And it's songs like these that really make me wish they would have worked together more often. I mean, it's cool that it got the release upload, but I think it's one of their weaker collabs. Yeah, that's right. Come at me, I can take it. Another example of how to do a pretty cool switch up. The first ever Monstercat song to feature Laura Bren, and she not only became one of the more significant vocalists on the label, but probably my personal favorite vocalist to ever grace the label. Oh, and the song's cool too. A pretty iconic release from him back in the day. I mean, it only just recently reached 1 million views on YouTube, which is a big thing for any Monstercat release. The first Affixer release in a while where Monstercat didn't have to fear for its life. What a cool song to debut on Monstercat with. No joke on this one, it's dope. I mean, what can I even say about this one? It's absolutely one of my all-time favorites. I mean, really, what a legendary song. And such an important part of Monstercat history. Just give this one listen and you'll understand the magic of older Monstercat. Right then and there. I don't think any of his tracks will reach the popularity that Bad Pitch did. But with that being said, it's still insane-like, so if you liked Bad Pitch, then you'll probably like his other stuff too. A lot of people remember this song for how awesome it is, and they're not wrong. However, I remember this song because someone made the great Way the Fuck Dark. Being the song that kicked off his Dance to It EP, this title track was the song that put Tut Tut Child on the radar for every Monstercat fan, and despite its age, I totally understand the hype behind this track. The first Monstercat song to have 2 switch-ups? I mean, fuck it, right? One thing I should mention to newer Monstercat fans is that this green is what they would use for their glitch hop releases, except this video is from the fan-made channel and not the actual Monstercat YouTube. So they didn't actually introduce this color until 2013. Also, the song's alright. Please do not use this song as a mean to pick up chicks, trust me, it doesn't work. The original version of an iconic Golden Age release, but of course, we'll get there when we get there. We didn't have enough iconic names that debuted in 2012, so let's throw Direct in there as well. I think the best part about this song is how it was the first release to feature the next release outro card, which would showcase a small video clip of what the next release would be. This would be something that stopped being a feature later down the line, but still a fun thing to have at the end of each video. The same song, but longer. The same song, but without the vocals. I can't imagine how memorable this song would have been if it weren't for whatever that pre-drop vocal was. Skiphonics was a neat addition to the Monstercat family, but unfortunate that he didn't stay on the label for very long. I really want to know how Stereotronic came up with that title. Further proof that the nerds were in their prime during their 2012 run. Perhaps one of their weaker offerings during their Monstercat days, but it's still a solid bop. I'm not crying, you are. A collab that I don't think most people would expect to work on paper, but worked surprisingly well in execution. I think this was the song where Rogue really started to hone in his own sound and utilize the parts of his music that made him unique. The debut of TVDS, who would later go on to rebrand himself under the name Atmospheres. This was the first track of his Black Sky EP, and something tells me the inspiration for that name came to him during the middle of the night.
Rada.
Weirdly funky, but I like it. I want to take this opportunity to let you all know that the first ever Monstercat release, Affix's Dubstep Killed Rock and Roll, was released on July 4th, 2011. This song right here from Stephen Hawking was released on July 4th, 2012. Not only that, but they both collaborate later down the line on July 4th, 2016. I just thought that was a fun little thing to learn. Plus, I didn't really have much to say about the song in general, so... honestly, probably the heaviest direct song you'll ever hear on Monstercat. pretty. Dubstep was never Droptek's strong suit in my opinion, but this track was weirdly ahead of its time for what it was. Well, it's like I said, dubstep was never his strongest genre. Well, it's like I said. Okay, all jokes aside, Droptek's dubstep stuff wasn't that bad. This song, however, I was never a fan of this one. Someone learned the hard way not to fuck with Tut Tut Child. Tristam and Stephen Walking didn't collaborate that often, but when they did, it was either something fun and memorable and awesome, or it was Jingle Bells. Rogue was slowly but surely becoming one of my favorite artists during this era, and Dynamite was a pretty big part of that. I wouldn't say this is underrated, but this was their first release after Disconnected came out, so guess which one got the shorter end of the stick? Back then, you needed Sorcery to make a song like this. Statistically speaking, Hellberg was getting there. Solero was one of those artists that you either really came around to or just didn't really care for that much. Luckily for me, he was the former. A couple of departures here. For one, this would be the last time we ever saw Obsidian on the label, which is a shame because he did bring some interesting ideas with him. And the other being Afixa, as this would be his last song on Monstercat until he returned in 2016. And even then, his releases were very spread apart from one another. With that being said though, this was a great way to go out. Mitchell Claxton was an interesting name during this period, releasing some of the longest Monstercat songs ever released at the time. This song alone goes just over the 9-minute mark. If you've ever heard the original opening for the Monstercat podcast, then you know damn well what this song is. I was never a huge fan of their orange side, so to speak, but exceptions can be made. Oh yeah, there's that Noisestorm sound that I love. I hear people say that this is their favorite Muzzy song, and that statement is usually followed by me spilling out yesterday's lunch. I imagine whenever old school Monstercat fans see a pyramid, this song automatically plays in their head. This song would pretty much single-handedly become the face of the entire glitch hop genre for Monstercat, and even today it's recognized as one of the greatest releases during Monstercat's early years. Run-Funk is one of the guys from Televisor doing his own thing for a little bit. Didn't entirely work out until 2015 came around, but we'll get there when we get there. How are you going to get Project 46, Varian, and Afixa on a song together with an animated music video featuring fans from around the world celebrating Monstercat's 1-year anniversary, and then it not even reaching 500k views after 11 years? Does that not sound insane to anyone? This song is so absurdly goofy, and I am all here for it. The debut of Holly Drummond, who also goes on to feature in quite a few releases over the years. Oh man, the song is cool too. Varian, I don't think that's how daggers work. Not his biggest song, but still a banger. Another iconic song from the original Monstercat podcast opening, and yes, that title is not deceiving your eyes. That is the actual name of it. And all of a sudden, the sales of French fries increased dramatically. Meh. I can't even make a joke out of this one, it's just a fun banger. If modern love is this repetitive, then thank God I'm single. Whoa, easy there, Tiger, I don't like you like that. Another song from the old Monstercat podcast opening, and a pretty good one at that. You know what? There's so many Millennium jokes you can make with this one, just use this as a free space to put whatever joke you think fits best. The most underrated release of his during his time on the label. A fitting send-off to the Run-Funk name. This song doesn't live up to the hype, as it doesn't straight up kill anybody who listens to it. Solero was another producer who was slowly becoming one of my favorites during this period, and if anything, he was one of the artists I would have looked forward to the most going into the new era. Classic Muzzy strikes again. As much as I hate to say it, I'd bump this over Let's Rock any day. Another huge milestone for pegboard nerds, right up there with Disconnected. Too bad we never got a fan song called Storm Shadow. Certainly not the flashiest release of theirs, but it's still Televisor. Simple but effective. What is there to say about this song? Okay, you can cut now. Kicking off Monstercat's Trick or Treat compilation, their only Halloween compilation, this one involved zombies and a disco. I mean, what else were you expecting? The one song on here that simultaneously felt like it belonged and didn't. You could argue this one doesn't really fit either, but I mean, it's the atmosphere that drives this one home. Yeah, no, this fits, 100%. A song that's been shit on so often, it's basically a porta potty at this point. However, I always thought it was weirdly unique, and on top of that, it's also been technically labeled as the first trap song on the label, which makes much more sense than it has any right to. I've got nothing for this one. Just absolutely beautiful. The original, but D&B. This remix always felt, for lack of any better words, flaccid. Statistically speaking, this remix ain't half bad. The original, but given more of an electro house feel to it. The song that made me question if I had to watch the show or not to really enjoy it. I'm sorry, but Halberd before 2014 never really interested me that much. Okay, this is a cute one. Icarus moment. Morphine is a hell of a drug. Like, actually, it is. This kicked off his We're All Mad Here EP, and I gotta be honest, I never liked this one. Tut Tut Child D&B is pretty uncommon, which is a shame because this is actually pretty cool. A great example of a song where everything outside of the drop is better than the actual drop. If I was forced to talk about this song, the best I could say about it is that it does indeed exist. I feel bad not knowing how to pronounce this even though it's an English word. If your jester is having an affair with anybody, then you might want to rethink how you run your kingdom. Dat title. This one always felt strangely low quality compared to his previous releases, at least to me it did. Well, it's like I said before, I think this televisor logo that kind of looks like a bottle cap is the most underrated thing about this song. The drops do not do this song justice. Kicking off Rogue's Dreams EP, it shocks me even to this day how high Laura Brem's register goes on the song. Underrated as fuck. Rogue Under the House colors will always look weird to me, but the song itself is pretty great. A great way to end off the EP. Seriously, if there's any EP that I would recommend listening to from 2012, it's this one. Honestly, it's hard not to love his goofy nature during this era. Surprisingly chilled out for his typical dubstep at the time. Also, hi, welcome back. Haven't seen you since, the beginning of the year. This next set of releases was part of their New Artists Week, which should be pretty self-explanatory, and okay, the guitar in this is pretty sick. What a unique name to the D&B scene at the time, especially when it comes to his later Monstercat releases. Don't even get me started on that shit. Not only the debut of Ramesses B, but also Charlotte Haining, who I still consider to be one of the most iconic vocalists during this era of Monstercat. Another pretty iconic song from 2012, although Vicetone would go on to be one of the most successful names to ever grace the label. I don't think I've heard of any other artist that fans want to see return to the label more than Sub Format. I mean, it's not the best version of the song we end up getting on the label, but it's also not the Tristam and Stephen Walking one, so I'll take it. If you can imagine in your head what old school Muzzy sounded like, but then turn that into a glitch hop song, then that's pretty much what you get here. There isn't really anything Christmassy about this one, outside of the title, I guess. But, you know, it's insane-like, so there's no reason not to enjoy it. Considered to be one of the worst Monstercat songs of all time, and understandably so, I honestly think it could have been a lot worse. Also, we'll talk about this color in 2014. If this wasn't a sign of how quality Mr. Fijiwiji can be, then I have no idea what would have been. Honestly, they handled this song in the absolute best way they could have. A great way to close out the last Christmas comp we would get until 2018, so if you're looking for more Christmas songs throughout this series, you're gonna have to wait a while. 2 words. Saxophone. Again. You know, this would have fit on the Halloween comp from earlier. Like, perfectly. Probably one of my favorite debuts that ever happened on Monstercat. It was your typical house, but still really well made. As someone who has never liked this song, this being the last release of the year just hurts my soul.